Tormented Souls is the best Resident Evil game that's not called Resident Evil. I went into this thing thinking it was going to be a middle-of-the-road experience. I even played the first hour of it quite a while ago, and I thought it was kind of boring. But I have officially finished Tormented Souls 1, guys, and I cannot sing its praises enough. In fact, I wish it was talked about more. It's got an average of a 7 out of 10 on Metacritic, which I can understand some of the complaints, but this is easily an 8 to 9 out of 10 game for me personally. Tormented Souls follows Caroline Walker, a woman who is investigating a disappearance at a mansion after getting a letter that these two twin girls went missing. When she arrives here, she's ambushed, knocked out, and wakes up with one eye missing, stuck in a bathtub with surgical equipment connected to her. Caroline's now awake and scared, and she must figure out what the hell is going on and who's behind all of this. That's all you need to know as a hook for the story. Before we dive deeper, I want to preface this review by saying that Tormented Souls is a fantastic game, but it has a caveat. The developers said that before the game came out, it was meant to be the atmosphere of Silent Hill combined with the gameplay of Resident Evil. And honestly, when I play this game, I get way more of the Resident Evil vibes from it. It's really fun playing a great Resident Evil clone, and it's probably the best one that's out there, but that's also all it really can be. And although lots of games from our past have been inspired off of other things, Halo was inspired off of Aliens, but Halo, I think it would still exist even without the movie Aliens. Silent Hill was inspired by Resident Evil, but Silent Hill would still exist without Resident Evil. It would be very different. The aesthetics and atmosphere of Silent Hill are very unique to it, and have nothing really in common with Resident Evil in that regard, and therefore, that's how it would exist in some form or fashion without that predecessor. Tormented Souls does not exist without Resident Evil. It's fundamentally, mechanically, and in almost every single way a direct result of the influence of that franchise. Unfortunately, it just does not stand on its own 2 feet. Change out Caroline Walker with Jill Valentine. Change the enemies out with zombies. And I swear to God, it would take me 5 minutes to realize you aren't playing a Resident Evil game. I just wanted to get that all off my chest after playing this thing, because it's also a fantastic Resident Evil game. The blast to the past of fixed camera angles is haunting at times. The devs take the creepiest image in a room and make it the centerpiece in all these still frames. Look at this deer head that's in the corner of the screen. That is the centerpiece. The statues that loom over you in the main hall, or the dolly shot that follows Caroline down a dark hallway. The focal point of every fixed camera angle is something terrifying. There's so much passion put into these aspects of the game. The puzzles are really clever, making you think you know exactly what to do, but then you're going to get a gotcha moment by the devs that are going to show you that the game is always one step ahead of you. It's very satisfying, it's rewarding when you finally figure it out, and most of the time, these puzzles are fantastic. I am going to touch on that some of the puzzles are the kind of wander around the map for 30 minutes to an hour until you figure out what you're supposed to be doing, and I'm not gonna lie, that's not my thing. This becomes a little more frequent towards the last half of the game, so it's worth noting it, but it doesn't bring down my feelings about the game that much. There's only one puzzle that did this to me in Resident Evil 1. There's quite a few that I've heard are in Silent Hill 1. There's 2 types of resolutions to these puzzles that you feel like you're forced to look up a walkthrough with. It's either the reaction of face palming yourself and saying, oh man, I should have figured that one out. That's a great puzzle. Or it's, how in God's name did you expect me to figure that shit out, bro? And so much of Tormented Souls is the former, but there's a couple of times where they do hit that latter point. The puzzles have that range from being some of the best I've seen in a game like this, or being so infuriating that you'd think the developers are just patronizing you. You'll get a floppy disk puzzle that actually expects you to understand the way floppy disks work. What? If you're below the age of 35, that's not common knowledge. And the worst part is that none of this knowledge is provided to you in the game itself. Instead, they just expect you to either know it or look it up online, which should never be the expectation of the player. A game should be able to give you information like that, especially for some piece of knowledge that not many people are really going to know off the top of their head. For the most part, the puzzles are great, and they even get to the point of being some of the best I've seen in years. For a split second when I was playing, I thought this vinyl that I collected randomly was going to be a useless item just for shits and giggles, and then it actually tied into one of the best puzzles in the entire thing. I'm obsessed with the puzzles here. There's one I want to talk about to point out how the developers want to subconsciously make you remember stuff from earlier in the game. There's a part in the story very early on when you have to turn on a generator. Much later on in the game, about halfway through the story, you have to get across some water that's electrified. You probably aren't going to remember the generator that well considering it was a few hours ago already, but to help you subconsciously remember, they put a unused generator sign down here in the basement so your brain registers the generator from earlier, and now you're remembering to go to it to solve the puzzle. It's a clever way to have the player subconsciously remember something without explicitly having Caroline Walker talk out loud saying that she has to go back to the generator, because that would just be lazy. Everything you see, everything you pick up, everything will eventually play into a puzzle sooner or later in a satisfying conclusion. The satisfaction feeling also bleeds into that Metroidvania level design with the shortcuts. The moment I'm expected to go back to an area that would take me 10 minutes to get to, they throw an elevator in front of me, and the realization hits that the place they want me to go back to is actually 3 floors above me, and taking that elevator, I'm going to get there in 10 seconds. Constantly rewarding me just through the exploration of a level. That's what makes for stellar design. The feeling of progression just by wandering around. The only part of the game that doesn't really have this is the sewers and the bunker areas and the final part of the game, but that's because Tormented Souls is getting more linear towards the end to try and fast track you to the final boss. It's fine. It's nothing that really upsets me. It's just worth saying that these areas aren't as fleshed out or as entertaining to go through as the main mansion for the first 2/3 of the game. I cannot undermine how much of the level design and the puzzles holds this game up for me. Everything I said earlier about this still being a Resident Evil clone is true. That's the worst thing about it. Because if you asked me what is identifiable about Tormented Souls, what's unique outside of the name of the game, some of the enemies, and some of the character names, I don't think I'd have an answer for you. It's so indebted to Resident Evil, from the save room themes, the ink ribbons being tape recorders, the mansion aesthetic, the main hall of the game that looks identical to the RE1 mansion. Even the sound effects sound almost identical. And although they do have a couple of original things added to these parts of the game, like Caroline Walker updating you on the story while you save the game, there's just still so much pulled directly out of those other franchises. None of the hardcore Tormented Souls is the greatest video game ever people out there cannot convince me otherwise. They even pulled the piss poor B-movie voice acting directly out of Resident Evil 1. I don't know if it was intentional or not, but it's terrible.
What? I'm sorry. I don't remember you. I certainly don't remember coming here before.
Hell, I mean, even the priest character in this game has lines that sound like they're AI generated or just some of the worst sound editing I've ever heard in my life.
Their use inside the operating room was forbidden long ago, but I've heard that they are still used for autopsies. In the morgue, you might find a clue that could lead you to the girls.
The only question I have for this entire script is, who is doing this? To explain who's doing this, that would be getting into the best part of it being a Resident Evil clone. This whole game started from a couple of fans, and that's the greatest part about it. The development team was only 10 people, and the 2 people that started that company truly made something worth talking about. Ironically enough, it's a game that can't stand on its own 2 feet, but yet it can stand toe-to-toe with some of the best early 2000s survival horror games ever created. It's not one of my personal favorites due to its dependency on those franchises, but if you tore the title off, replaced it with Resident Evil, it would be in my top 3 Resident Evil titles easily. It's the perfect nostalgia shot, but not in a fan servicey way, but instead in a way that takes survival horror tropes of the past like backtracking, fixed camera angles, inventory management, actual difficult but satisfying puzzles, and an old Metroidvania level design, and it formulates all of that in some concoction to create an old school game for a modern era. And it might not be the most accessible horror game. It's not without its faults, but it's the only mainstream game doing what those inspirations did 20 plus years ago for modern audiences today. And maybe, just maybe, that's the answer to the question earlier that I couldn't answer. The question as to what makes Tormented Souls unique today. Not even just being the only mainstream game doing this, but it's also the one that does it so incredibly well, just like those classics of the past. I can only hope that the sequel improves upon everything that the first did, and that it gets better than just a 7 out of 10 on Metacritic. This has been your friendly neighborhood horror appreciator. Please comment down below if you plan on playing Tormented Souls 2, recommend me any horror game you'd like me to review, and I'll include your comment in the next video if I pick the game that you recommend. As always, we are going to be appreciating every horror game out there, and I will always appreciate you.